President Trump was charged because the evidence established that he willfully broke the law. Rather than accept his defeat in the 2020 election, President Trump engaged in a criminal scheme to overturn the results. After leaving office in January of 21, Trump illegally kept classified documents at his Mar-a-Lago social club and repeatedly tried to obstruct justice to conceal his continued retention of those documents.
Donald Trump just posted what sources are calling the most dangerous threat he's ever made against a witness testifying before Congress, and the language he used could be putting Jack Smith's life in immediate danger. We're not talking about typical Trump insults or political attacks. We're talking about a sitting president calling a federal prosecutor an animal who should pay a big price, who deserves far worse than losing his law license. And doing this while Smith is literally testifying under oath about Trump's crimes. This isn't normal political discourse. Legal experts suggest this could constitute witness intimidation, obstruction of justice, potentially even incitement to violence against someone who's providing evidence of presidential criminality. And what makes this particularly terrifying is Trump reportedly just stripped Secret Service protection from other people he's targeted. He's allegedly creating conditions where his supporters could act on these threats while victims have no security. If something happens to Jack Smith after Trump called him an animal who should pay a big price, there might be blood directly on the president's hands. But before we break down how catastrophically dangerous Trump's threats against Smith could become, real quick, you cannot trust mainstream media to explain what witness intimidation by a sitting president actually means for rule of law. That's why we built John Brown's show to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want analysis that actually connects Trump's threatening language to the broader pattern of authoritarian violence he's allegedly encouraging, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what Trump posted about Jack Smith could cross legal lines that even he hasn't crossed before. Your subscription actually matters here. All right. Let's get into what Trump actually posted and why legal experts suggest it could represent one of the most serious witness intimidation incidents in presidential history. Because this isn't happening in a vacuum. Jack Smith was testifying before Congress at the exact moment Trump was calling him an animal deserving punishment. That's a sitting president using his platform to threaten someone who's under oath providing evidence of crimes that president allegedly committed. And the timing could be deliberate. Trump might be trying to intimidate Smith during testimony, trying to send a message to anyone else considering cooperating with investigations, trying to demonstrate that providing evidence against Trump results in the president sicking his followers on you. If that's what's happening, if Trump is weaponizing his base as enforcers against witnesses, we're not just watching politics anymore. We might be witnessing the construction of authoritarian rule through threatened violence. Let's start with what Jack Smith actually testified before Congress, because understanding the context makes Trump's threatening response even more significant. Sources indicate Smith delivered some of the most damning testimony about a sitting president that congressional committees have heard in modern history. And he didn't hedge, didn't soften language, reportedly stated flatly that Trump broke the law and should be held accountable regardless of political party. According to reports, Smith testified that during his tenure as special counsel, he followed Justice Department policies and legal requirements, that his decisions were based on facts and law without regard to Trump's political activities or candidacy. And then Smith allegedly got specific about what Trump did, stated that Trump was charged because evidence established he willfully broke laws he'd taken an oath to uphold, that grand juries in 2 separate districts reached conclusions based on Trump's alleged actions. Think about what that means. Smith reportedly told Congress that Trump engaged in criminal schemes to overturn election results and prevent lawful transfer of power, that Trump illegally kept classified documents at Mar-a-Lago and repeatedly tried obstructing justice to conceal retention of those documents, that highly sensitive national security information was allegedly held in a ballroom and bathroom. These aren't political characterizations. These are reportedly statements of fact from a prosecutor who reviewed the evidence. And sources suggest Smith went even further by standing behind his decisions completely, allegedly testified that he would make the same prosecutorial decisions today based on the same facts regardless of whether the president was Democrat or Republican. that no one should be above the law in this country and the law required Trump be held accountable, that doing otherwise on these facts would have been shirking his duties as prosecutor and public servant, which he had no intention of doing. Make sure you're subscribed to John Brown Show, because what makes this testimony potentially devastating is Smith apparently wasn't just talking about the past. Sources suggest he was also addressing the present and future, making the case that the system that allowed Trump to avoid accountability despite breaking laws needs to change, that there's a two-tiered justice system benefiting the wealthy and well-connected who can delay and obstruct with money and power, that norms that prevented holding Trump accountable need to be broken, or more lives will be lost and situations will only get worse. That kind of testimony, delivered under oath before Congress with cameras rolling, creates permanent record that can't be spun away. Smith reportedly documented Trump's criminality in official congressional proceedings, created evidence that future prosecutors or investigators or impeachment proceedings could reference, and Trump's response to that testimony reveals just how threatened he feels by having his crimes laid out so clearly in such a public forum. So what exactly did Trump post in response to Smith's testimony? Because the specific language matters enormously for understanding whether this crosses into potentially criminal territory, and sources suggest the post contains multiple elements that legal experts might characterize as threatening or intimidating. Reports indicate Trump called Smith a deranged animal who shouldn't be allowed to practice law, that if Smith were Republican, his license would be taken away and far worse would happen. And then Trump allegedly wrote that he hopes the Attorney General is looking at what Smith has done and that a big price should be paid for what they've put the country through. Think about what each of those phrases potentially means. Calling someone an animal is dehumanizing language. It's the kind of rhetoric that historically precedes violence, because once you've stripped someone of their humanity, harming them becomes easier to justify. When a president uses that language about someone, it could signal to supporters that normal restraints don't apply to this person, that he's not worthy of the protections we'd give humans. And the phrase, far worse than losing a law license, is particularly ominous. What could be worse than professional consequences? Physical harm, imprisonment, death? Trump allegedly left that threat ambiguous, which some might argue makes it more dangerous because followers can interpret it however they want and act accordingly while Trump maintains deniability. Share this video with everyone you know, because then there's the big price should be paid language, combined with invoking Attorney General Pam Bondi by hoping she's looking at what Smith has done. This could constitute Trump instructing his Justice Department to go after Smith. That's potentially using presidential power to retaliate against a prosecutor who investigated him. That's what weaponization of justice actually looks like, despite Trump's constant projections about Biden doing it. And legal experts analyzing the post reportedly note the timing element. Trump posted this while Smith was testifying, while he was under oath before Congress. That timing could make this witness intimidation, an attempt to interfere with congressional testimony by threatening the witness during his testimony. That's obstruction. That's potentially criminal conduct by a sitting president happening in real time on social media. But what makes Trump's threats against Smith potentially more dangerous than typical political attacks is the pattern of Trump allegedly stripping security protection from people he targets. Because threatening someone is one thing. Creating conditions where they're vulnerable to violence from your supporters is another level entirely. And sources suggest that's exactly what Trump might be doing. Reports indicate Trump recently stripped Secret Service detail from Hunter Biden, someone Trump has repeatedly attacked, someone his supporters have targeted with threats and harassment, and Trump allegedly bragged about removing that protection, made it public that this person he's been vilifying no longer has federal security. Think about what message that sends to anyone considering violence against Hunter Biden. The president just told you the target no longer has protection, and sources suggest this pattern extends beyond Hunter Biden. Former government officials who've criticized Trump or testified against him have reportedly lost security details or been denied protections they'd normally receive. People are being put in harm's way by Trump's rhetoric and then having their security removed, potentially leaving them vulnerable to his supporters who might act on his threatening language. Make sure you're subscribed because when you combine Trump calling Jack Smith an animal who should pay a big price with Trump's pattern of stripping protection from targets, you potentially create deadly conditions. Smith is now someone Trump has dehumanized and threatened. If Smith's security gets reduced or removed, if Trump creates vulnerability while simultaneously inciting his base against him, the consequences could be catastrophic. And there's reportedly specific concern about who might act on Trump's threats. Sources indicate Trump has told ICE agents and other federal forces they have absolute impunity, that they can do whatever they want as long as violence is committed on Trump's behalf, that he'll approve it, co-sign it, pardon people for it. When a president gives enforcers immunity for violence while simultaneously designating targets like Smith as animals deserving punishment, you've potentially created conditions for political assassination. Think about what happens if an ICE agent or Trump supporter decides to act on these threats. If they interpret "big price should be paid" as instruction to harm Smith. If they believe they'll be pardoned for violence against someone Trump called an animal. The president could claim he never explicitly ordered violence while his rhetoric and promises of protection created the conditions that made violence inevitable. That's stochastic terrorism. That's how authoritarians use plausible deniability while unleashing violence against opponents. But there's another dimension to Trump's threatening behavior that sources suggest might be getting overlooked. The possibility that Trump's cognitive deterioration is making him less able to control impulses or understand consequences of his actions. And if the president is experiencing significant cognitive decline while simultaneously making threats and wielding authoritarian power, the danger multiplies exponentially. Reports indicate there are visible signs of potential health issues. Photos allegedly showing Trump's hands covered in bruises. Instances of confused or incoherent statements. Moments where Trump apparently didn't realize he was publicly instructing his attorney general to go after political opponents when he thought he was being subtle. These could be indicators of someone whose mental faculties are declining in ways that make him more dangerous because unpredictable and less constrained by normal caution. And sources suggest Republicans in Congress who could invoke the 25th Amendment to remove a president clearly unfit for office are instead enabling continued deterioration. They're watching someone who might be experiencing serious cognitive problems, threatening prosecutors, and wielding federal power recklessly, and they're doing nothing to stop it because removing Trump creates political problems for them. Think about what that means for everyone Trump targets. If the president is cognitively declining and making threats without fully understanding consequences, if he's less able to be talked down or convinced to moderate behavior, if he's operating on impulse rather than calculation, the threats become more dangerous because more unpredictable. You can't reason with someone who isn't thinking rationally. You can't predict what someone experiencing cognitive decline might do next. And there's reportedly concern that cognitive issues make Trump more susceptible to manipulation by people around him. That advisors could potentially influence him to take actions he wouldn't normally take. That he might be more easily convinced to escalate threats or follow through on violent rhetoric because his judgment is impaired. A cognitively declining president being influenced by authoritarians in his administration could be even more dangerous than Trump operating with full faculties. Now let's talk about what Smith's testimony was distracting Trump from, because sources suggest there's a reason Trump's threats against Smith were so over the top and desperate. Smith wasn't just testifying about election interference and classified documents. Reports indicate congressional questioning might have touched on issues Trump desperately wants buried. Issues involving Jeffrey Epstein that could potentially destroy what remains of Trump's presidency if they gain traction. According to sources, Republicans in the hearing were allegedly so scared of Epstein-related questions that they tried redirecting to Trump's other crimes. They'd reportedly rather discuss election interference and classified documents than have Smith address Trump's connections to Epstein's network. Think about what that reveals. Trump's own party considers his potential Epstein associations more politically toxic than his other documented crimes. And there's reportedly a pattern where Trump creates distractions whenever Epstein issues threaten to surface, when he can't talk about Greenland anymore because Europe allegedly stood him down, when Venezuela operations become unpopular, when normal distraction tactics aren't working, Trump might escalate to increasingly desperate measures, threatening prosecutors, stripping protections, creating chaos that dominates news cycles and prevents sustained focus on Epstein connections. Share this with everyone because sources suggest Trump gave a 2-hour rambling press conference and wasn't asked a single question about Epstein. That's a catastrophic media failure. The president's potential connections to a sex trafficking network should be the biggest story in journalism. But Trump's threats and chaos and constant scandals create so much noise that fundamental questions about his fitness and associations get buried under the daily outrages. And that might be the strategy. Keep creating crises, keep threatening people, keep dominating headlines with chaos so that investigative journalism into Epstein connections can't gain sustained traction. It's worked so far. Trump has avoided serious accountability for Epstein associations despite mountains of evidence suggesting problematic relationships, and threatening Smith might be Trump's latest attempt to create distraction through crisis. But one of the most infuriating aspects of Trump's threats against Smith is the blatant hypocrisy about Justice Department weaponization. Because Trump constantly accuses Biden of politically motivated prosecution, while simultaneously, often in the same post, instructing his own attorney general to go after political opponents. And sources suggest this hypocrisy is so blatant that Trump might be experiencing cognitive issues that prevent him from recognizing the contradiction. Reports indicate congressional testimony from Smith explicitly addressed weaponization claims, that Smith was allegedly asked whether Biden or anyone in the Biden White House ever directed him to seek retribution against Trump or anyone else, whether Biden directed any prosecutorial steps whatsoever, whether Biden threatened to fire him based on actions taken or not taken, and Smith reportedly answered no to everything. Then contrast that with Trump's documented behavior. Sources indicate Trump publicly demanded prosecution of New York Attorney General Letitia James, saying she should be arrested and punished for holding him accountable. Trump's Justice Department allegedly opened sham investigations into her. When Trump's own appointed U.S. attorney spent 5 months investigating and concluded there wasn't enough evidence to proceed, Trump reportedly fired him for not delivering the politically motivated prosecution Trump wanted. Think about what that contrast reveals. Biden's Justice Department reportedly operated independently without White House interference in prosecutorial decisions. Trump's Justice Department was allegedly weaponized repeatedly to go after people Trump considered enemies, with prosecutors being fired when they didn't deliver political results. Yet Trump constantly projects his own behavior onto Biden while doing exactly what he accuses others of. And now Trump is allegedly doing it again by threatening Smith and invoking Pam Bondi in the same post. He's accusing Biden of weaponizing DOJ while literally instructing his attorney general to investigate Smith for the crime of testifying truthfully before Congress. That's textbook projection, accusing others of what you're actively doing yourself to create confusion about who's actually engaging in the behavior. But there's a broader point that sources suggest needs to be understood about this moment, that if Trump faces no consequences for threatening witnesses, for potentially obstructing congressional testimony, for calling prosecutors animals who should pay big prices, we're failing at what some are calling a third reconstruction. And that failure could condemn us to cycles of authoritarian movements in different forms with different leaders, but same fundamental threats to democracy. The argument reportedly being made is that America has failed Reconstruction twice before. After the Civil War, when we didn't fully root out the systems and ideologies that enabled slavery and Confederate rebellion. After Trump's first term, when we didn't hold him and enablers fully accountable for their abuses. And now we're potentially failing a third time by allowing Trump to threaten witnesses and wield authoritarian power without consequences that would prevent future authoritarians from following his playbook. And sources suggest the pattern is clear. Each time we fail to hold powerful people accountable for attacking democratic institutions, we make it easier for the next authoritarian. We establish that presidents can threaten prosecutors without consequence, that witness intimidation is acceptable if you have enough political support, that the rule of law doesn't actually apply to people wealthy and connected enough to delay and obstruct. Think about what happens if Trump threatens Smith's life in a public post and faces no legal consequences. That establishes precedent that presidents can threaten anyone investigating them, that witnesses testifying against presidents can be dehumanized and targeted without the president facing obstruction charges. Every future authoritarian learns that lesson and pushes boundaries further, and the reconstruction failure might extend beyond just Trump. Sources suggest there needs to be accountability for everyone enabling his abuses, that people like Pam Bondi, who might weaponize Justice Department on Trump's orders, need to be removed and prosecuted, that judges who facilitate Trump's obstruction need to face consequences, that the entire network of enablers needs to be dismantled, or we'll just get different faces pushing the same authoritarian project next time. So here's what Trump's threat against Jack Smith represents: a sitting president calling a federal prosecutor an animal who should pay a big price, while that prosecutor testified under oath about the president's crimes. Language that could constitute witness intimidation and obstruction of justice. Threats made in a pattern where Trump allegedly strips security from people he targets while telling federal forces they have impunity for violence committed on his behalf. And cognitive decline that might make Trump more dangerous because more impulsive and less able to understand consequences of threatening witnesses. The legal and moral implications are staggering. If Trump faces no consequences for this post, for threatening Smith during congressional testimony, we've established that presidents are above laws against witness intimidation, that they can use their platforms to incite violence against anyone providing evidence of their crimes, that authoritarian tactics work as long as you maintain enough political support to avoid accountability. Jack Smith stood before Congress and testified that Trump broke the law. That evidence proved beyond reasonable doubt that Trump engaged in criminal activity, that he would make the same prosecutorial decisions today because no one should be above the law. And Trump's response was to call him an animal deserving punishment and invoke his attorney general to suggest she should investigate him. That's not politics. That could be witness intimidation by a president trying to avoid accountability through threatened violence. Make sure you're subscribed to John Brown Show because we're covering every aspect of this threat and its implications. Every legal expert analysis of whether Trump's post crosses into criminal conduct. Every indication of whether Smith's security might be compromised. Every way this fits into broader patterns of authoritarian violence Trump might be inciting. This could be the moment a president explicitly threatened a witness's life in retaliation for testimony, and we're tracking every development as the full danger becomes clear. Stay tuned.